Hello everyone, it's Rachel. Welcome to my channel and to today's video. It's been a little while since I last posted here. I'm excited to be back, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys along with me again as I do some more sewing. My project I have planned now is to make a quilted jacket for Esme. She has a bunch of jackets already, but nothing that's like really warm. So I wanted to make her something it's a little bit warmer for cooler nights, and I just love the look of quilted jackets, and I think they're so cute. So I thought I'd have a go at making one for her. I found this pattern, I thrifted it, and it's, I don't know who it's by, Berta, number 3418. These have kind of like the same look as the quilted jacket, so I thought I'd give this a try. It was only 89 cents. I don't even know how much I'll be able to get done tonight because it's already 8:30. So my plan was just to have a look at the pattern and try to figure it out, take a look at the instructions. This hasn't even been cut into. It's totally intact still. I'm just going to trace it out because I want to keep it, like I don't want to cut into it. I want to keep all the sizes. So there's a couple different options for the jacket. There's this one which has got a hood and 2 pockets. There's B, which has the hood and 1 pocket. And then there's C, which has no hood and 1 pocket. Except I kind of want to combine these. I want to have 2 pockets at the bottom, but no hood. It sounds like you just stitch the pockets right onto the front. So I don't think it should be an issue. I'm just gonna open this up and take a look at the pattern because I don't know if it's the exact same pattern for both kinds of jackets or if the C pattern is different from A and B. So I'm gonna take a look at that and see. So looking at it, it looks like it shouldn't be a problem combining the two because there's no like spots for the pockets, like you just stitch them onto the front. So that shouldn't be an issue, which is great. So I'll be able to combine those two. Now I'm just gonna do a quick read through the instructions and then, oh, it's almost 9. Yeah, depending on how long that takes, start tracing out some of the pieces so that tomorrow, whenever I get around to it in the next day or two, I can start cutting everything out. Just finished up tracing out all the patterns. I'm going to head to bed now. It's getting pretty late, and pick this up, cut this out, and cut out my fabric next time. Hello, we are back. It is a couple days later, actually. I took last night off to get some other things done, but I'm really excited to be diving back into this project again today. I took some time this afternoon, cut out my patterns, so those are all ready to go, and I've got my fabric here as well. So this is the fabric I have chosen for this project. So for the main outer layer is going to be this nice chocolate brown. I really like this color. I think this is just gonna look so cute on me. And then for the lining inside, I'm gonna be using this. I wanted something kind of contrasting, so I have like a solid color on the outside, but I really liked the idea of having like a fun pattern inside. Nothing too crazy, and I really wanted it to be gender neutral. I love like the idea of having a solid color and then like floral inside. It looks so pretty. But I want this jacket to be gender neutral so that any future baby can wear it. That way I don't have to like store multiple jackets. And then I also wanted the jacket to be lined because like with something a little bit warmer. So I got this blanket. I would have preferred if it was white. But when they had a white one at the thrift store, I did not grab it. So this is just like kind of like fleecy blanket. So this is going to go in between the two layers, the outer layer and the lining, just to give it a little bit more warmth. So the main thing for tonight is really just cutting out the pieces. Cutting always takes me way longer than I expect it to. I always assume like it'll be like 20 minutes and then it's like an hour. So hopefully it won't take that long because there's not too many pieces and they're not that big. I just had a read through of the instructions because I think I saw earlier that it had some notes on like cutting out the fabric, how to do it. It's a good thing I did because I realized that I thought I got all the markings onto my pattern, but they had markings for the buttonholes and I didn't transfer those. So I need to pull out the pattern again and transfer those marks down onto my pattern, and then I'll be able to get to cutting out my fabric. So as always, that definitely took me way longer than I expected it to. They didn't actually have them marked out for me. They only had the top one and I had to measure the rest, which made it a little bit complicated. But we've got them all laid out and ready to go. Finally able to start cutting into it. Okay, so I just finished cutting out all my pattern pieces. They're kind of blending together here in the camera. I've also added my marks to them just using a water erasable pen. The pen wasn't going to show up well on this one, and my chalk doesn't really work well on fabric like this. So I cut, I don't know if you can see, but I cut little notches instead into this. It is getting to be quite late though. It's about 9:30 now. We are all set to go for hopefully tomorrow when I can pick it up again because yeah, everything is already marked. So I can just get going straight away. Hello, we are back again. It's actually a couple of days later. I was taking a look at the instructions here. So these instructions are actually like a little bit not what I was expecting. It says to like baste for like a lot of stuff in here. And it's like you baste it and then you stitch it instead of pinning. So you use like a longer stitch. I don't know if I'll do that just because I feel like I'd be a lot more comfortable just pinning things and then sewing them instead of trying to sew them unattached and then rip it all out and sew the actual thing. So I think I'm just going to skip over that. It's starting with the pocket. I think I'm going to overlock the edges. I think I'm gonna try that. Hopefully it works out. I'm gonna be kind of like making this up a little bit as I go. This is just a little confusing with all like the basting, and it's like a vintage pattern, so I guess that was something they used to do a lot back then. Anyways, I think that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so this is what I have so far. Looking pretty good. I still have to close this up. I'm thinking that I want to do some bias binding around the edge. I just feel like there's just some spots like this where it just wouldn't sit flat. And so it's like bunched up, and just the edges with like the threads and stuff. I feel like it would look so much cleaner to just do some bias binding around it. It just doesn't look finished to me. Like it looks like there's just something missing. So I think I'm going to make up some bias binding. I haven't done bias binding before, so I'll have to see it goes. But I think I'm going to make up some and add that around it because I think it'll just clean it up and make it look a lot better. To make the bias binding, I measured out a strip of fabric to go all the way around the pocket and then folded the edges in towards the middle. And then folded it in half. This enclosed all the raw edges nicely inside the bias binding. So I've just finished up with the pockets. They're looking so good. They're a little bit wet because I just went and washed off the lines for my quilting. They're definitely not perfect. This one, I made a bit of a mistake. I used some white thread. I might have to cover that up. I don't know. It might not be that visible, in which case I'll leave it. But yeah, I'm really glad I decided to do the bias binding. It looks so good. So like finished. So it looks like the next thing I have to do is to put the pocket onto the jacket fronts. The only thing is, because I'm doing the quilting on the jacket, I kind of have to do that first. I'm going to get the inner lining I'm using, pin that to the outside, do the quilting, and then I can sew the pockets onto the fronts. So I had mostly finished up all the quilting I had to do. I think I was on my last piece, or I had one more piece to go, and then I was going to be done. I was going to be able to piece it all together, and I realized that my pattern was actually too warped. Like doing the quilting had like stretched the pattern and it didn't match anymore. It wasn't going to work. Just really frustrating. So I basically had to scrap it and start over. I did end up keeping the pockets, and I'm probably going to still use what I had from that jacket and just cut it down to like a smaller size that'll still work. But yeah, I basically had to start over again, it was so frustrating. I was so annoyed with myself that I didn't like realize this sooner, that I got so far into it before realizing how warped it was getting. So I started over. I spent the past couple days just working on starting over again, and basically I realized that the best way to do this was to quilt it first. This is for the back. I laid my pattern down and cut out a rough square rectangle. I did not bother really measuring or anything. This is like a very Like, yeah, not neat. I was just really frustrated at the time and I didn't bother. I made sure to leave some space on either side and the top and the bottom so that while I'm quilting, if my fabric shrinks or warps or anything, there's going to be plenty of space in the middle for me to cut out my pattern onto the pre-quilted fabric. So I've gone and marked with a water erasable pen. I did lines last time, but I felt like that was just, I was having difficulty with doing it with my marker, and it was just easier to put all these little dots that I can just follow. Mine are about 2.5 centimeters apart. That's the width I found that I like. Basically, I've just got this big rectangle of fabric that I'm going to quilt. I will be putting my patterns onto these pieces, cutting them out into the pre-quilted fabric. This process of quilting the fabric was definitely time consuming. So if you're ever going to try something like this, I definitely recommend putting on a podcast or an audiobook, having something to listen to, or even a show on the TV, just because it is quite the long process of just stitching straight lines. So I ended up actually having to re-sew the pockets on because I put the pockets on before the front pieces were attached to the back, and then I realized that once you like line things up, that my pocket pieces were too close to the inside. This part that folds over for the buttons, it was like covering the pocket. So I had to rip them off, redo it. They're much better. I put them more towards the side than the middle. Now this is together. I just need to give the pockets a quick press because I just sewed them back on, and then I'm gonna attach the sleeves. So after I had finished putting together the outer part of the jacket with the inner lining, I then had to go and basically redo the whole thing of sewing the shoulders, the sleeves, stitching it all together with the lining, repeating the whole process of what I had done with the outer part of the jacket, just omitting the sleeves. Once I finished up with the inner lining, I could then put it inside the outer lining, piecing the two of them together. And then I made up my bias binding to go all around the edge of the jacket. This was a bit of a process making all of this bias binding. When I pinned the bias binding to the jacket, I made sure to fold the end of the bias binding in so that the raw edges were inside the bias binding. And to match up the seams, I actually had to do 2 strips of bias binding to go around the jacket. I put that seam next to one of my quilting stitches. Sewing the bias binding to the jacket was honestly quite time consuming and a lot more frustrating than I expected it to be. I was having a lot of issues with the inner lining and the bias binding on the inside of the jacket not catching. I had to go back and redo multiple areas of the jacket where the bias binding had not caught the lining or the bias binding on the inside. I don't know if I just didn't make my bias binding properly, if I should have had more bias binding on the inside than on the outside, if it had to do with the thickness of the jacket. This is definitely probably the hardest part of this whole project. Once completed though, it added such a nice touch to the jacket, and I was so glad I pushed through and got it all done because in the end it looked so nice. For the sleeves, I learned from my struggle with the main part of the jacket, and I stitched the jacket lining, the inner lining and the outer one together first before putting on the bias binding, and that made such a difference. It really helped keep everything in place. Then all I had left to do was to make the buttonholes. I actually really enjoy making buttonholes. It's kind of a fun process. And I also find it very satisfying seam ripping the buttonholes open. After that, all I had left to do was sew on the buttons, and the jacket was complete. So this jacket ended up actually being too big for my daughter, but it fit my son perfectly, so it kind of worked out in that way. Thank you guys so much for coming along with me as I made this jacket. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you would like to see more sewing related videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.